Hey G, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am wonderful and I am so excited today because we get to do another episode of
Yes.
Real Talk, Real Time, the Passion Project series. I'm so excited about this series where we have the opportunity to speak to fellow educators about the amazing things that they are doing, both inside of schools and outside, to follow their passion and their inspired lives to do the things that they choose to do.
Because they get to choose. You know, that's my word.
Because
All
they
right.
get to choose.
Yes.
Yes.
So tell us who's coming with us today.
So today we have not one, but two fabulous educators, which I am excited about.
Yep.
Jalene Tamerat and Sheggai Tamerat are joining us. So, ladies, please come on in. So excited to have you all join us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for
having
having
me.
us.
We're
Yes,
so happy to have you.
yes. So please, let's start by you just telling us a little bit about yourself, sharing who you are and what you are and what you do in your educational realm with our community. So, Shigay, we'll start with you, and then right after that, Jalane, please just follow right in.
Okay. Hi everybody, and thank you again, Georgette and Chandra, for having us. We're really excited. So much of what we do every day is just kind of in our own little bubbles, and so it's great to talk to each other and just share some of the things that we're working on, both individually and together as sisters and partners and thought partners and educators in the field. So. A little bit about myself. My name is again Sheggai. I grew up in Boston. I have been teaching for the last, I want to say about 17 years, 16, 17 years now. I have grown up around teachers, just like John and A as well. And both of our parents are teachers. My mother was an a career teacher. She started teaching, I remember, 3 years old, her working in the same school that I went to, where I currently teach as well. And my father, for a long time, taught math. And so John and I really grew up, just having really strong just values, but also great mentors who really paved the way for us to kind of think about education, both as a lifelong project and something that we should be, striving to make ourselves better, but also thinking about the impact we can have on other people's lives. So I say all that to say that, like my parents and like John and they also for a long time, I'm a teacher. I love to teach. I teach high school English right now. I teach ninth grade English at the John B. O'Brien School in Roxbury. I've been teaching there for a while. I really grew up in the school. So as I mentioned before, my mom taught there when I was a little girl. And it was the last thing on my mind to think that I would attend the school as a high school student, as you can imagine, being 17 years old and, just underneath your mother in that way. But she was really, really influential for me as I just saw the way that the kinds of impact, I should say, that she had on students. And it was something that I saw, and I think really early on, by freshman year in college, I realized that I wanted to teach as well. So I majored in English at Boston University. And I eventually went on to, went straight back into the classroom. I went straight to the classroom, I should say. I later got my master's in principalship and administration. But I went back to the classroom. Again, like I said, I just really like to teach. And so this is where I am, and this is where I've been for quite some time. I've done a lot of work outside of the classroom, and I think that's what John and I are going to talk a little bit about today. Is just kind of thinking about how my work in the classroom has helped propel some of my other passion projects, and how I've learned to really allow both of those, both my regular teaching load to really support the work that I love outside of the classroom, and how to kind of make it all come together.
Yes, nice. Thank you, Jalane.
Thanks, Sheggai. Excuse me. Well, Sheggai has clearly, described the first 20 or so years of my life. And I feel like I don't need to kind of, keep talking about the legacy of education that she and I have been carrying, since we were young. Acknowledging all of that, acknowledging that we come from a family of educators, that we also both of our husbands are educators, and one of them, my husband, was a K-12 educator for a long time, but they're both in higher ed right now, teaching. But as you can imagine, with the two of us, with our parents, with our husbands, like a lot of the around the table dinner talk has been consistently over the years around education. And so it's really something that, we live and breathe and are thinking about constantly in our day-to-day lives. Unlike Sheggai, I didn't want to be an educator growing up. I actually, had some other ideas about what I wanted to do professionally when I was younger. And as it so happens, sometimes the thing that you are resisting ends up being the thing that you are meant to do and you end up doing. And so I entered the education field about 3 or 4 years, I guess 4 years after I graduated from undergrad, and committed to the profession for now. I'm coming up on, I think, almost 20 years in K-12 education. My experience, however, as an educator has not been quite as linear. I spent about 11 years in the classroom, and some of that was broken up a little bit because I had go off and explore education from other vantage points, other angles. And that's been really fulfilling to me. I taught in the Boston Public Schools. I'm also a BPS grad. However, I didn't go to the O'Brien. And I taught, in Boston Public Schools. And, I have had the experience of teaching in 3 different BPS schools. And then kind of migrating over and exploring some of my passions in the academic world. I went and pursued my doctoral degree after about 10 years in the classroom, did that full time, and started exploring, teacher education is one thing that I looked at, but also global education and funds of knowledge pedagogy. And the global education piece is something that Sheggai and I are going to talk a lot more about today. After going to grad school full time, I went back into the classroom for a year. Then I went to the central office where I was leading new teacher development with my friend Chandra here for a few years. And more recently, I've been serving as the dean of a small teacher prep program and in graduate school here in the Boston area. So And if there's one thing that, Chandra, you may know about me, Sheggai, you definitely know about me. Like, while I have my main job, I always have my foot in some other things. And that's just kind of that's a way for me to explore my passions, to kind of think more deeply about how to make them live in some other areas of my life, including my day-to-day 9-to-5 job. But it also just kind of keeps me going. It keeps me energized. I find that without that outlet, without those other activities, things become stale. And maybe that's just a personality thing for me, and why I haven't had the linear kind of educator experience, career classroom teacher. But it, I like a little spice, a little excitement.
So. The point of this is to show how they can combine, Jalene.
Yes. I always do have my main thing, but you gotta figure out, what's authentically you and bring that into every part of your life.
Yeah. And that's what we're hoping, just like you said, you both are coming from this legacy of education, but you approached it in two different ways professionally. And now you've chosen to come together and share and come together as Tamerat Education. So tell us, what is Tamerat Education and what's led you to this place in education? Because while we know that your professional work is in education, your passion is still to move forward a certain aspect of education. So share that with us, please.
You want to take a share?
Okay, I'll start. So I think one of the things, for a long time, John and I were simultaneously in the classroom. And I think you mentioned before, teachers tend to talk to each other. Like we talk about all the things that we're going through, all the things that we're seeing. And I think that, John and I would have these regular conversations. They were very much ongoing. We had dealt with all the stresses and just, the challenges, the obstacles, et cetera. And one place that we found solace was just travel. We would take family trips together, and especially as we, got a little bit older, as we had children. Again, these are things that became a part of just like pause, right? So we can look forward to these, like, February break, let's go here. We're going to go to Dubai. We're going to pack our bags. We're going to go somewhere. And, it just became so much of kind of our identity, just both as individuals, but also it's just something that we could just share, just she and myself, my parents, our children. And I think for me, I didn't want the school year to stop that. And I wanted to really think about how I could continue to live the life that I wanted on a teacher salary, right? But also create the kinds of opportunities that I was having for my students. And I remember first when I was in high school, I was a part of this, of a nonprofit. And it was transformative for me. I remember it's called Summer Search. And Summer Search, stuck with me, just kind of just opened the doors, I think, for me, my junior year of high school. And they just asked me, if you could pick anywhere in the world, where would you go? And I said, I was like, who's gonna ask anybody that and actually make it happen? But I said that I wanted to go to West Africa. I wanted to go to Ghana. And so they sent me that summer and they paid for everything. And I was in this bubble. I went with a group of people that I didn't know. But I, left my family. Jalene and I, our father is from Ethiopia, but at that point I had never left the country, I don't think. And so that summer was so incredible for me. And that's when I really knew that I just wanted to see the world, that I was living in this like really sheltered bubble, I would say, for a really long time. My parents were very much, dictated kind of how far we were able to move. But I wanted freedom and I wanted to see the world and I wanted to see people. And so from that point on, I would say I really made that commitment that I was going to branch out a lot more. And so I think it started there. And then, as I mentioned before, Jalene and I spent years together, living together, teaching, but also traveling. And so, we took lots of trips and to a point where, if I can fast forward a little bit, when I started finding ways to bring these kinds of experiences to my students, I was taking students on my on my breaks. We were going to Korea. We were going to, I went to Mongolia one year. We went to various parts of Europe. And so it was really, really fulfilling. And I was watching all these things happen for them. But then I would come back and I would say, man, this was like this incredible opportunities for these 15 kids, for these 20 kids. And I wanted to be able to, just to mimic it for everybody else. And I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to do it. And sometimes you could do it for the 15 kids who could afford it. And there were a whole lot of other students who were sitting there and you could come back and you could talk about it and you felt like everybody else didn't know what was going on. And, unfortunately, as we're thinking about equity, as we're thinking about just just ways to kind of have these shared experiences, I was really struggling and I didn't know what to do. And so I think that's where Jalene and I, we realized how much of what we were struggling with, both in terms of like kind of what we were desiring for our students, as well as for ourselves. That's when we started having these conversations and started really thinking about like, what's next? Well, you know, what can we see happen?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, Jalene, you want to kind of pick up?
Yeah, so I'll pick up and well, first I'll share the context that, like Sheggai, my first travel experience abroad didn't happen. Actually, it happened a little bit later for me. I didn't, apart from like I guess my first trip overseas was going to the Bahamas for my senior class trip when I was at PLS. But you know, I didn't have like a real immersive overseas travel experience until I was 23 and we went to Ethiopia for the first time. And I remember that being a really pivotal moment for me in terms of, like Sheggai was saying, just kind of opening my eyes to the fact that the world is big and places are different than other places and ways of life are different. And it just kind of broadened my own perspectives on life and on the world. And it ignited something in me. So like Sheggai was saying, you know, from that point on, I think about 2 years after that, I started teaching. And one of the nice things about being in the classroom is that you do have those, those breaks. You have the February break, the April break, the summer vacations. And so I really made it a point of mine to at least once a year, if not more than once a year, to get out and see the world, travel, go somewhere, sometimes go somewhere completely like random without much tourist infrastructure, and just see people, like see how people live. What are the things that, they experience and that they understand, and, how are we alike, and how, what are the differences in the way that we experience the world and see things. And I remember, let's see, it must have been in 2006. That was the first chance that I got to travel, not just for kind of my own fulfillment and exploration, but like to go overseas and do something that would enrich my my teaching. And so I went to Southern India. I was a science teacher for most of my teaching career, and I got an Earthwatch fellowship. And I went to Southern India to work on a street theater project with an NGO over there. And really, I spent 2 weeks in an urban center, and then, like time also in some rural communities. And with the expectation that I was going to kind of bring some of my learnings back to the classroom, excuse me, and back to my school community. And once I realized that, like, hey, I can go see the world and get somebody else to pay for it, and have what I've learned contribute to my own development as an educator, and kind of spread information amongst the school community. Excuse me. Sorry. That also ignited something in me. And so, from that point on, like I was exploring other opportunities to have similar experiences abroad. I went to Singapore on another grant, a Fund for Teachers grant, in 2000, I guess the next year, 2007, expanded that trip and, went to, some neighboring countries. And then in 2013, this is when Sheggai and I applied for another Fund for Teachers grant, and we went to Singapore together. Also got to travel outside, like stay in Singapore and explore education there, but then, go to a neighboring country. That was when, I think the first kind of, the first like ideations around like, oh, we could actually do something together because we're both like really excited about global education. And I will just say, like, for Sheggai, I think for you, like you taking the kids on these trips, like that seems to be kind of a major focus for, for some of your travel, at least. For me, I have always been more interested in like the teacher experience abroad and like how do you bring that back and share it amongst the professional community at the school, or share learnings amongst the professional community at the school, and then leverage that towards like global ed instruction in the classroom. And so, for one of my trips to Singapore, I remember coming back. It must have been the first one. Around that time, my school was pursuing membership in the International Baccalaureate Organization, and I was in, I was in a school with a leadership model where, I was taking on this extra responsibility of being an IB coordinator for, and had a reduced teaching load as a result. And so one of my jobs as an IB coordinator was to professionally develop, to support the curriculum development to align with IB goals, but to support the professional development of the teachers in the school who would have to make this adaptive change toward like teaching for international mindedness. And it wasn't easy. Like, the teachers, some of them were kind of more adept at doing this than others for multiple reasons. And, one of the questions that emerged from that process for me was, why is this challenging? And it was challenging for myself sometimes too, like implementing international mindedness or infusing it into my curriculum. So like my question was, why are we having like challenges with carrying this out when we have this amazingly diverse student body who have all of these intercultural, international connections themselves? We were working within an immigrant community in Chinatown, and many of these students, if they weren't immigrants themselves, they were of immigrant origin. And even within the Chinatown community, like I imagine that I know actually that, you could live your life and not speak any English. Like you could live your life kind of within that community and really, maintain a connection at least to certain regions in China. And so I figured that, if students have those assets and they're bringing them to the classroom every day, like really it's just a matter of us tapping into those assets and leveraging them towards like making them, like developing them to be more internationally minded. So that's what brought me to grad school. And I have done much more work to kind of explore the connections, the connectivity between kind of student assets or funds of knowledge and global education. But it's also kind of the particular like angle or lens or angle that I'm bringing to this is more centered on teachers and like teacher like adaptive change around global kind of mindedness or global perspective.
So help us a little bit, because all of our viewers might not actually know what global education is and what you kind of mean by that. So give us kind of a definition and your experience with it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I'll take that. So since like global education, we kind of think about it as an umbrella term, or we can kind of think about it as an umbrella term that includes things that many educators may have heard of. Like, there's global education, but there's also global competence. There's also global citizenship. There are a number of different ways to kind of conceptualize it, and it's a little nebulous, right? What I focused on in my own research is the branch of global education that deals with, well, it's called global competence. And it deals with building the skills, dispositions, basically the capacities in students to like be equipped to think about and act on issues of global significance. So like if you say that systemic poverty is a global concern, right? We deal with it here in the United States. We deal with it in all other parts of the world, really, getting students to like understand that, their own experiences or understandings of systemic poverty are influenced by their context, and that someone who lives somewhere else may have a similar experience, but their perspectives may be a little bit different. So like there's this disposition piece. There's empathy that's also built into that. You have to be empathetic to like really want to and be able to address global issues in a true sense. And then there's like the skill building component. So like, do they have the skills to, well, actually, before I talk about skills, do they have the substantive knowledge about the world? Like, do they know what systemic poverty is, and like what what are the political implications? What are the economic, of course, implications? What are, the different things that, make a global issue a global issue? And then it's like the skills. So do they have the skills or the capacity to collaborate with others, to like address this challenge, to communicate with others, to share their point of view, listening skills. So a lot of it is soft skills. But sometimes, it may be like for older kids, like, do they have the mathematical skill to be able to like, to understand and statistics, or to like calculate certain figures, or, like, so that they can actually look at data comparatively. So dispositions, substantive knowledge, skills, those are all really, really important.
And I guess for me, I would just add that, I guess, as I mentioned before, right, when I was a senior in high school, when I went on that trip, I came back to my classroom and nobody knew what I was talking about. Nobody had known where I'd gone. Nobody had seen what I'd seen. And I was very much there, and I was by myself, and I was so excited, but I was really struggling trying to share that experience with everybody else. I think today we're living in a very different world. Students are very tapped into social media. They're looking at Facebook. They kind of know a lot more about the world, so that when I asked students, who wanted to come with me to Korea, right? There was a huge line of students that kind of knew where South Korea was, and they could tell you every K-pop band, et cetera. And so I think that it feels different. There's like this yearning to grow and to see the world in a way that I think, as a 16-year-old for myself, that I didn't necessarily have those same innate desires at that point, because I didn't have those, I didn't have that community around me in the same way. So for me, as I'm thinking about global education, I want students to really be able to see that there's a much bigger world outside of their community, and out their neighborhood, outside of, the 2-mile block, or that they, that they live and breathe every week or every day. But I also want them to know that it's attainable, that they can, that they can reach out and and talk to people. And there's a lot of people around the world who are dealing with the same issues as they are. And, perhaps are approaching it really differently. And there's a whole lot of people who have very, very different cultures and very different experiences, and that we have a lot to learn and grow from those experiences as well. So for me, what was important is to kind of have those experiences, but also to think about, as a teacher, what's my responsibility? Now that I come back, what do I do with this information? I don't want it to be this one-time experience, and then it's this thing that the 30 of us shared, and then it goes away. So how do we kind of impact one another? So whether or not people were on those trips, so that how do I have those conversations with my colleagues? How do students have conversations with each other, so that, again, that we all know that the world is really, really big. But when a student comes back and says, hey, I went to the North Korean border, and I worked with all this orphanage, and we saw, had conversations about what reunification between North and South Korea may look like. Or we went to, I think one time when we were in Mongolia, we were talking about racial tensions between Mongolian and the Chinese. So again, students need to see that these issues are things that the world is dealing with. And we're not alone. And I think that's really important for them to have conversations with other young people but also for teachers to say, okay, our students don't need to sit down at the desk for the entire day. And so even now, like as a teacher, and I'm like watching students at the computer, sitting in those one spot for the entire day. I see so many opportunities for growth, but I also see I'm also a little worried, because I don't want students to get sucked into this, to this one space. And so technology, I think, is our friend in a lot of ways. And I think that as we're dealing with the pandemic, as we're dealing with a lot of issues, both nationally and internationally, we should be really thinking about what's our commitment to each other as we're trying to better our own situations, but also how we really need to be thinking about the world in a different way too. I think it's our responsibility as teachers right now, more so than anything, because our kids are going through, and we're going through it, right? We're all really dealing with a lot. We're carrying a lot, and we're going to need to come up with some answers, but we also need to have some really, really thoughtful conversations about the possibilities of what can be, I think.
It feels like you all, while we know your sisters, it seems so appropriate that one of you's focus is on students and the other's focus is on teachers. It just seems like the perfect combination. So while I even feel like you have been able to make an impact, I know that's usually our question, like what ways in which you were able to have an impact, I'd like you to talk to those that are viewing, whether live or on a later viewing of this. How do you know? Like, how did you know that this was what your work was supposed to be? And secondly, how do you find your partner? Because we can't even assume that just because you're sisters, that was meant to be the partnership that you forge.
It's a great question. Well, I think around the question of like, how do you know is like, I think that's an interesting question. And I personally, I don't know if Sheggai feels differently, but I don't feel like there's one specific point that I can, identify that where I was like, oh, this is it. But it's kind of like, I feel like I'm a fairly introspective person or reflective person. And I look for themes, like for myself, like within myself and for myself. And I try to pay attention to like what makes me feel good and energized and what things like just don't sit right with my soul. And so I think that over the years, like I know for a fact that like every vacation, it was like, where am I going? Where am I going? And I know that when I was somewhere else, like I enjoyed it. Travel experiences are not always like relaxing. They're not always easy. But even if I'm in a situation that, where I'm not kind of like laid up on a beach somewhere, I'm still feeling energized and I'm still feeling good about it. And at the end of the day, like, I don't necessarily want to stay there. Like, I'm ready to come back home usually. But I have enjoyed those experiences, brief as they may be, of like getting out, learning something new, coming back and thinking about how it relates to kind of my craft as an educator. And so like over time, like if there are themes, and this was clearly one, I make a note of it, consciously or unconsciously, like I'm paying attention to the things that I keep gravitating to the things that I keep talking about. Where is my energy going and where does it like feel good going? And so I think that maybe, like I've always known that like this is what excites me, at least since that first trip that I took to Ethiopia back when I was a younger woman. But like I think that as I progressed in my career, progressed in age, I really just as you progress, you start pruning, right? You cut out some of the stuff that like isn't yours, or or that you feel like you're forcing yourself to do. and you focus more intently on the things that feel good and the things that energize you and that can sustain your attention over time. And so, like, I think, I'm here now, and, Sheggai is here now, and we have talked, and are doing some planning now, and are doing some small things to like start giving birth to what I think is going to be a real manifestation of what we have been, kind of doing on the side and giving some attention to, but like are more ready to dive in with more intention and focus.
And,
I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, I think like I would also add, I think that, whereas I agree with a lot with it, what Jalene mentioned, I think that we also, like for me, I should say, for me, I think when things don't feel good, right? And I think we also kind of have this, we also sometimes tend to jump ship, right? And, and we say, okay, this doesn't feel good right now. This is not making me happy in this moment, etc. I don't always feel like it's that you need to just shed and move on in that way. I think that sometimes those are like, signs of growth, right? And signs of, reminders that, that sometimes it's, you're doing the work that you need to do as well. And so I think the only thing I would add to that is, I would say I remember I went to a PD and somebody it was focused on this idea of knowing who you are. Like if somebody asks you who you are, make sure that you have a real and honest understanding of who you are, and as we're all evolving and growing, et cetera. But as you're thinking about who you are, make sure that you can look at yourself in the mirror every day and answer that question. So as you're moving through your 9 to 5 or your work day, ask yourself whether or not the work that you're doing is a true reflection of who you are. So as I enter the classroom, so much of me is thinking about kind of how I can be the kind of teacher that I want for my students, or Jalene is thinking about kind of taking all those things that she's been doing her work and research on and applying that into what a solid school could look like. I think that if we think about those things and say, does it hurt? Yes. Am I trying to challenge kind of the current system or the current things that are in place? Yes. But that also means that I am being true to myself, right? And I'm so committed to those. For us, it's kind of that global understanding. It's hard to change the whole culture of a school, when you're doing it in little pieces. If I can say yes, that I'm being true, then let everybody know that when I walk into a room, that this is the person who cares about whatever this subject is or this topic is. And so that I know that I'm going to try to find a way to allow for my work and my passions to connect and connect with you, so that we can be of support to one another, right? Because I'm being true to myself and you're being true to yourself, et cetera. And so we can hopefully collaborate. We can also make everybody's wishes come true, right? Everybody's passion projects. I can be an ally for you, but I can also be like a support and a resource, a think partner, if you will, so that we can all kind of move the line a little bit, so we can all be happy also. I think that's a huge part of it too. Every time that I work with new teachers, I think it's one thing that when you go into the classroom, like as I said, I went in, we were around all these people who were teachers. And so it was really natural for me to say, okay, well, I'm going to teach too. And I've had this very linear professional career. But as I think in hindsight, if I look back and I talk to a first year teacher, I'm also saying you need to find a way to allow that 9 to 5, or to have presence in the things that you care about outside of the classroom. And so for us, we were thinking, okay, well, we know we love to travel, right? So how is it that I'm going to take that desire and that passion and bring it into my work, right? And so now it's exciting because I can continue to feel good about about my teaching, right? And my teaching is made better, right? And in Jalene's case, she can have deeper conversations about what good schools look like and should look like as we're, as we're facing all these global challenges. But I also know that when the school bell rings or when summer comes, I can leave and then I can refuel again, right? I can think, I have a space to think. and I have a space to grow. And it's not just about, I think that's something like, this is not just about going off and, everybody wants to go off and travel and, so I see all these places. But I think that when you're constantly aware that the two worlds exist within you at the same place, that you're the same person and that the two are building off of each other, I think that's when you feel good about kind of everything, and you feel like you're in a good place.
Yeah. Can I just jump on that for a second? The last 5 or so years of my career has been spent in the teacher preparation, the teacher education space. And I know that retaining teachers is a huge, huge issue right now. We are seeing extraordinary amounts of teachers leaving the profession for a lot of reasons. Definitely exacerbated by the fact that we're currently in a pandemic, and we're all suffering the effects of that. But when we're thinking about teacher retention, my position has always been that if you want to keep people in the classroom, if you want people to have a more or less linear experience, you want people to stay longer term, you have to allow them to do just what Sheggai is saying, which is like let their gifts and passions live within their 9 to 5, or come alive within their 9 to 5. I think about when I was years ago, and I was being interviewed for the teaching position at the school where we had the IB program. The principal there, it's a pretty unconventional, it seemed like an unconventional interview at the time, but he ended up he was a mentor of mine, and one of the questions, or probably the question that stood out to me that he asked me in the interview was like, "What are your gifts? What are your passions?" And I know that he asked all the teachers who came into those doors those same questions in their interview. And I think that was a really important question to ask and for a leader to know about, their staff. You want to know what people are excited about. You want to know what their gifts are, because those are the things, like if they can find fulfillment in their job, like those are the things that are going to be present. If someone is like very, very interested in X, activity or, topic, and they have to walk into the doors of a school building every day, and that part of themselves has to be locked up somewhere, they're not going to feel like they're bringing their whole selves into the role. And that, when people don't feel like they can align with their passion in a real sense, or it has to, their lives have to be compartmentalized to the extent where they can't, be their authentic selves and be energized, then they're going to leave and they're going to go and find that satisfaction elsewhere. And so if we really are concerned about keeping teachers in the profession, we need to understand and acknowledge what gets them going. And even if it's not directly related to their role as educators, we have to be able to find a way to let it live and let it be present.
Yes. Y'all just filled my entire cup. Because I think so much about teachers and living, as Parker Palmer called it, the undivided life, right? And so this full integration of self, rather than this idea of work-life balance, which many people know, I just do not believe in that whole deal. So your work should be balanced with the rest of you. It's insane to me. But this whole integration of who you are, right? And finding your passions and then fueling them. And I just think that, first of all, I thank you, right, for letting folks know that you should take the time to figure out what you're passionate about, what your gifts are, what you love to do. Because I think that so many times teachers aren't given permission to do that, because everybody thinks, well, your talent and your gift is teaching. That's what you love to do.
Right.
And, right, there's all this other stuff that exists to fire me up and that I'm interested in. And sometimes it's major stuff and sometimes it's little stuff, but we all have stuff. But to take the time to really be able to kind of sit still for a while and reflect over time. When you talked about your journey, like I'm sure 20 years ago, you couldn't imagine that you're here, right? And so, people will think, well, where do I even begin? And you begin by just beginning, right? Just sitting, thinking, reflecting, and taking a risk. Take a trip, take a walk, read a book, whatever it is, and then just allow yourself to go on that journey with yourself, right? And that's like majorly impactful to who you will be as a human being and as a teacher, right? So that full integration of everything is just unbelievably impactful, I think, personally. And I'm just thinking about how you've integrated that so well into your work and into your future works, I know. And so I'm thinking about, what are you thinking about your impact over the long haul, right? Like the impact that you're thinking about for schools, for education, overall, in this country and beyond. Like, what are the possible impacts you're thinking about as you are moving forward with, your business and your ideas? What's next? How are you going to change the world?
How to change the world, right? Leave it there. So I think so it's incredible to be able to work together. I think it's exciting just to seeing how many, just watching our relationship. John and I are very close, but also watching to see how our professional lives can collide, really, and positively impact one another's work. As we're working in separate places, separate institutions, et cetera. So I think that over the last 2 years, specifically, as people have been really dealing with the pandemic and all the challenges of the pandemic, it's obviously put a pause on a lot of the travel that we could do. So I think that we are constantly have to say, okay, well, here's a moment where it doesn't feel good because I'm locked in my room, right? And I'm stuck on this computer, and all I want to do is jump on a plane and go somewhere, right? I think we have to constantly just stop and as you said, Chandra, just reflect for a second. Where do I go, right? How do I pivot? And so one of the things that excites me about the future endeavors is, just how open people are, schools are right now, and wanting to have conversations, difficult conversations, I would say. I think everybody sees that there's a need to converse with one another, to hear a whole lot of voices who, didn't necessarily feel like they were being heard. And I think that for us, as we're thinking about what it means to be mindful of global education, we're still dealing with all those same things, but we also need to really look in our own communities as well. And so we need to start, kind of go back a little bit. Okay, so, what are the questions that we have for one another? We see every day we turn on the news, we're watching all of the conflicts that are existing between one community and the next. And so I think for so long, Jalene, we're really thinking about kind of the global ed, right? As the various competencies, as Jalene mentioned, but those competencies are still very relevant in our community that's in front of us. And so I think right now, what's important is to ask those same questions, but force teachers, administrators, and students to have that same dialogue, to have that same conversation, because the person, that's sitting next to you doesn't necessarily look like you, does not share your same values, but you need to hear them nonetheless, And so I think that right now we're starting to talk to a lot of schools, and we're thankful for those opportunities, but we're talking to schools, we're talking to students, and in many cases, schools and students that don't look like us at all. And we're having a lot of hard conversations, but I think, again, those are necessary conversations. And so when we're thinking about our impact, I think that the same thing that we were hoping to achieve, 5 years ago when we were talking about all of the opportunities for travel, I hope that we're hoping to get the same result, I should say, by going a different path, and so that we can start off a little bit smaller, right? And then hopefully when the time comes, then we can slowly move forward and think about our community in a different way.
Yes, I love that. And, Yeah, and I would say, Sheggai, it's not even starting smaller. It's creating a foundation, right? Like we need our communities to build empathetic dispositions, or to embody empathetic dispositions, to look at what's going on locally as a first step in connecting it towards like looking externally. And so I think that we're taking this time right now to to work with the school communities that are interested to look at building those foundational like dispositions and skills, with the hopes that there will be a chance to go from the local to the global. Also, I'll just say that with the past couple of years, we were already on track to having a more technologically like integrated life, right? Like we were in the middle of a technological revolution already. With the pandemic, that's been amplified. We've been fast tracked. And I think that, with time, if we're not careful, we will be spending more and more time online at the expense of having authentic connections within communities. And so like, I think that part of the work that Sheggai and I are doing right now kind of helps to, while we do plan to leverage technology, like we are also concerned with maintaining real connectivity within communities and allowing communities to, because we're human beings, like we need to belong. Like this is a basic need of ours, and if we don't do it, we'll be in trouble as a species, right, and as a world. So, like I think it's really important to maintain a focus on community connections, community building, and that's kind of where I see a lot of my work going, in the near future. So
awesome. So I would love to know how people could get in touch with you. Sheggai, if you could start, let us know.
Okay. So you can feel free to reach out, whether it's about any of our professional pursuits, or you just want to talk about, things that are happening in education right now in the classroom, or just say hi. My email is, I know I love to talk, so feel free. My email is sheggait@gmail.com. You can reach me by there, or reach me at that email, I should say, excuse me, anytime.
Okay. How about you, Jalene?
And for me, all of the above, except my email address is jtamarat@gmail.com.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure. I feel like I want to stay and talk longer. I really, really, really just love how you talked about finding the themes in your life. And I really think that that is the entry point, that if anybody took anything away from here, hopefully you will reflect on these wonderful women and the example that they've set in thinking of the themes in their lives and looking and seeing what really works. And then even what does it? I heard that they say that too.
Yeah.
And being able to make meaning from how that will impact their life and the work that they want to do.
Absolutely.
Thank
And
you.
I look forward to all that will be coming in our local schools, our community, and the world, because I know there is nothing but greatness on the other side of this conversation. And I am so excited. And we will keep in touch, and we will keep our community abreast of what you're doing, because you are doing amazing work, following your passion. And so when you talk about this whole idea of following the themes in your life, find out what the themes are, follow them, and then do something about it.
That's
And
right.
then do something about it. And that's what you all are doing. And so grateful that you are. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank
Guys.
you.
Thank you for this platform. As you're talking, like, man, you should, tell everybody who wants to travel when the world opens back up, just to email us. That would be a great thing too. Just getting
and
educators together.
That's true.
We'll be working on our website, and people can stay tuned for that. Like that will be coming soon, and we'll be excited to launch
Thank
that.
you for the work that you guys are doing.
Oh, thanks.
Thank
But
you.
I already want you to know that you are inspiring people, even though you don't realize it, whether it's the students that get to go on the trip or the ones that are going, whether it's the teachers that are being able to be a part of the education career or not. Both of you are impacting folks. And so congratulations to you on that as well.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation today.
Thank you. So
Awesome.
Chandra and I are the hosts of Real Talk Real Time with Chandra and Georgette. And we also have an educators forum that you are welcome to join. Chandra, just say a little bit about that.
So we are teachers who have created a platform and a space to talk with and learn from other teachers. It is exciting work that we all do every day, as you can just hear from this conversation. And as teachers, we could probably talk about this all day.
Yeah.
But we're doing exciting work inside and outside of our schools every day. And we want to share that. And we want educators to be able to elevate, education through our own voices. And so that is what Real Talk, Real Time on Real Talk with Georgette and Chandra is all about. Keeping it real.
Yes. So if you want to join us there, we're on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel. And if you want to be featured here on the Passion Project, reach out to us through either of those mediums, and we'd love to have you. So we just thank you for joining us and have a great one. We'll see you next time.
Until next
Thank
time.
you.
Thanks again.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yeah.